OK，谢谢大家来今天参加我们的这个讲座。那么我们前面几句话用中文讲，但是后面都是有英文的，因为林奇博士主要是用英文来交流如果大家有什么问题的话，你可以在留言当中写下来，我们帮你翻译成英文。但是今天这个讲座呢，现场我们不接受提问，我们因为时间很紧张。事先的提问前面已经给大家征集了，那么林医生呢会尽量的会回答问题，将来我们有后续的学习，大家可以参考我们的中文译文来一起来学习，好不好 ？Okay, so now I'm going to start the presentation. Welcome everybody. Today's seminar we will speak mainly in English because Dr. Lynch is communicating with English, and we will be the best way, the language we can use in here. If anybody needs a translation, you can chat for us. We can help you. Also, we will have a follow-up starting the recording, and we try to put the Chinese subscription on the recording. So we have lots of chance to follow up to learning lots of things on the topic. The topic is very important about autism and also the emotion management, which is many family, especially when the children grow up, we can see the consequence there. Lots of the young men, very talented young men, lost their ability to continue work or continue study simply because they cannot handle the the mental health issue. So we are very grateful that Dr. Lynch gave a speech. Let me quickly introducing the two organizations we have. Organizations that one here. Hold on a second. Let me okay. So okay, hold on a second. Let me stop share. Okay. So the first one, so this is a serious seminar. We are starting from the Autism Awareness Month, which is April, but we continue to have the topic, so we keep going. So for us, the Autism Awareness is another month, is a year, where basically is year-round program. So this is organized by AFI, Alliance for Impact, and also the CAAC is Chinese American Association for Autistic Community. So AFI, lots of family familiar, and this is a nonprofit, starting in New York, but we do the special needs family support, include autism, include ADHD, include depression. So those kind of family have the children on these three special needs, and we come together, we help each other. And the next one is the Chinese American Association for Autistic Community, is an organization we try to unite the resource for the Chinese community. So it includes lots of medical side, the scholar, family member and advocates, and we try also do lots of work for this special community. Okay, so today's topic, we're very grateful to have Christoper Lynch. He's the child psychologist registered in New Jersey. He's the medical director for pediatric behavior medicine in the New Jersey hospital. And he's very important is because he has 20 years helping the children on autistic how to control the anxiety and also the frustration. And one of his book, many of us know, we translate to Chinese, and this is the only book published in Chinese about this topic. So it is very valuable. And lots of parents learning from the book, then we starting earlier, we realize that emotion control is very important. Not only, social study, social skills, behavior, but emotion control. And we see the consequence right now. So without further, I'm just turn to Dr. Lynch, and we welcome. We thank for Dr. Lynch give a speech at his very late time, And Dr. Lynch, it's all yours right now.
Great. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And you're right, it's a very, very important topic. Like you said, many of your children have great skills and talents, but it's often the emotion that gets in the way, because the emotion interferes with the behavior, and that's often what holds them back. So I appreciate your comments on that. Okay, so as Ben said, my name is Dr. Christoper Lynch. I'm a child psychologist. I work out of Greyeb Children's Hospital in Morristown, New Jersey. And I have a special interest in working with kids on the autism spectrum, and a particular interest in working with anxiety. And why anxiety? Because it's so prevalent in autism. It's a very prevalent emotion for autistic individuals. It's also very often the reason why parents bring a child to me. At first, they might be talking about behavior. My child has meltdowns. My child bangs his head. My child won't listen. But when you dig under the surface a little bit, very often it's anxiety that's contributing to that. So it's important to address behavior, but it's more effective and just as important to address the anxiety that's leading to the behavior. So because I work mostly with children, I do some work with young adults. A lot of my references are going to be to children. However, a lot of what I'm going to say applies across the age range and includes adults as well. Also, a lot of what I'm going to be saying applies not just to autistic children, but to children who have neurodevelopmental concerns in general, including ADHD, including learning disabilities. And also, all of us have anxiety. Anxiety disorders are very high in children across the board. So a lot of what I'm going to be saying can also apply to children in general. Oops. Just trying, there we go. All right, so there's a very close relationship between anxiety and autism. And those who have autism, who reflect on their condition, often highlight this relationship. Temple Grandin is a famous autism advocate, and she's been noted to say that the principal emotion experienced by autistic people is fear. John Elder Robinson wrote a very good book called Look Me in the Eye, and he says, like many others with autism, it leaves me fearful and anxious whenever I must deal with new people or strange situations. I know this anxiety is shared by countless others on the spectrum. I hide it well, but the fear is always with me. And there's many other firsthand accounts by people with autism that really bring out how prevalent and disabling anxiety can be when you have autism. But I do have to emphasize that anxiety is not the only emotion that autistic people have. And just like anybody else, they can have the full range of emotions, both positive and negative, including happiness, including depression. But when we're anxious, that tends to overshadow all of our other emotions because it puts us in that survival mode. There are prevalent studies that have looked at this issue, and research has found that in general, there's an overall high level of psychiatric disorders amongst people on the spectrum of many different types. And anxiety tends to be one of the highest, with close to 40% having at least one diagnosable anxiety disorder. So that's 40% are those who meet full criteria, but many, in fact, most people on the spectrum have clinically significant levels of anxiety, whether or not it meets the criteria for a diagnosis. Okay, so I don't know if you can guess what that country is that I took a photograph of. For those of you who guessed right, that's Ireland. I lived and worked in Ireland for 5 years, and that's my commute went through those mountains, not on that road, but on the other side of those mountains. And when I was in Ireland, one of my jobs was to run a group for teenagers with autism. And what do you do when you have a group of people on the spectrum? You do social skills, right? We always emphasize social skills. You got to do social skills training. So that's what I was doing or trying to do with this group of young people. And it was going okay, but there was something missing. I felt like the group was a little stilted. There wasn't a lot of spontaneity in the group. And I felt like it could be going a little bit better. So what I started to do was I decided to start off each meeting with a relaxation strategy. So one session, maybe we'll do some breathing exercises. The next session, maybe we'll do some muscle relaxation exercises. Maybe we'll do an imagery exercise before we started the social skills. And I discovered two things. First of all, the kids with autism, they were well able to learn the techniques. They really saw the value in them, and they were able to learn them, and they were able to apply them. They were very enthusiastic about learning these chill skills. But the second thing I discovered was that once they were relaxed, guess what? Their social skills improved. They were able to interact more spontaneously. So it really started to dawn on me that you can teach all the social skills in the world, but if a child is anxious, they're not going to be able to pull off that skill. And it really got me to wondering what other areas in autism are impacted by anxiety, like Ben was referring to earlier. And it's basically all areas of life can be impacted by anxiety, particularly for people on the autism spectrum. And that's what really led me into the focus of my career, the books that I have written. All right, so skills, right? We always talk about skills when we're talking about autism. What do we emphasize? Speech and language skills, motor skills, learning skills, adaptive living skills, like, making your bed or doing your laundry, and of course, social skills. All of these skills are important. Don't get me wrong, and we need to work in all of these areas. But again, if you don't have those emotional skills, it's going to impact all of these other areas. It affects us when we're anxious. It's hard for us to communicate. It affects our fine motor skills when we need to write or to do something. It affects our ability to learn. It affects our ability to follow through on tasks. And as I mentioned earlier, it affects our ability to interact with each other socially. Okay. So the one skill that's missing from this list is anxiety management. And that's why I want anxiety management to be thought of as a skill equal to all those other areas, and that we give it just as much attention as those other skill areas that I mentioned earlier. Okay. All right, so why should we teach chill skills to our children? Well, anxiety, as I mentioned earlier, is often the primary reason why autistic children have challenging behaviors. Your children don't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, today I want to have a meltdown. Today I'm going to make mom and dad's life miserable, okay? It's almost always unintentional that a child has these behavioral challenges. I know it can seem like they're doing it on purpose, but the truth is that there's something that's leading to that. Your children are good children, but the anxiety creates confusion that can really quickly lead to anger, and that can often lead to those behavioral challenges that we see. Okay, so why do they need to learn these skills? Well, we can't eliminate anxiety-producing situations. So anxiety, we all experience it, right? We all have stress and anxiety in our lives. Things don't always go according to plan. And anxiety, as I mentioned earlier, is pervasive. So we want to equip our children with these skills because they are going to be encountering anxiety in their lifetime. There also won't always be a supportive person nearby. There are some people, I've seen them, could be a teacher, could be an aide, could be a parent, who are really, really good at reading your children. What I mean by that is that they know when your child is starting to become upset, and they can go in there and they can fix the situation and change the situation and help your child so that it doesn't escalate. But that person isn't always going to be around, and not everybody's going to see all of the signs that your child is starting to get upset. So again, it's important for your child to have that skill, for your child to say, you know what, I'm really getting upset here. I really need to do something to stop the situation. I remember what happened last time. I need to ask for help. I need to take a break. Whatever it is, your children need those skills too. And it helps to develop confidence and problem-solving skills. We all feel good when we master something, right? And it's no different with children, and it's no different with anxiety. I just had a kid last week tell me how proud he was that he was finally able to do a cannonball dive off the diving board. You know, it's a very important skill when you're a 12-year-old boy and you're at a pool at summer camp. So he was very, very proud that he was able to cope with that fear. And you know, the kids I see, they Dr. Lynch, guess what? I went on a roller coaster for the first time. I was a little bit nervous, but I talked my way through it. So it's really a great way to help to develop that confidence that our children need. Okay. How to identify anxiety? How do we know when our children are anxious? Well, first of all, they may be able to tell us, right? Sometimes if your child is verbal, they may simply tell you when they are anxious. And a big part of my work is giving kids the vocabulary for expressing emotions, to know, to say, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm upset, to be able to tell us when that's happening before it turns into a behavior. Okay. Now, for kids that are less verbal, they may only give us part of the story. So, for example, I had a patient come in. He was very, very distressed. And the first thing he said to me was, bye-bye, fire drill. Bye-bye, fire drill. And I knew from that little bit of information that they had a fire drill at school. And like a lot of kids on the spectrum, that was something that was very, very distressing for him. So sometimes you have to read between the lines, and sometimes you need to be a detective from a little bit of information. But if they can tell you they're anxious, then you want to listen and help them to work through explaining it. There are, of course, physical signs of anxiety that apply to all of us: shaking, sweating, looking really tense, startling very quickly, those sorts of things. There are behavioral signs like nail biting, hair pulling, skin picking. A lot of kids pick at their skin when they get very anxious, and all kinds of compulsive behaviors tend to increase when we're anxious. And as I mentioned earlier, there's often an increase in challenging behavior. So if your child or your student is starting to act in ways that aren't normal for them, if they start to have a meltdown, you want to think about, okay, what's going on here? What's making them upset? What's making them anxious? And there's also an increase in sensory sensation-seeking behavior. Now, there's a little bit of controversy over this one, over self-stimulatory behaviors. So that's things like spinning around. That might also be things like hand flapping. It could be pulling at something. People with autism often explain that these behaviors are calming. It actually helps them to calm down. So we don't necessarily want to take that away. But what I do want to say, I use the 3D test. If it's one of the 3Ds, you want to start to work to reduce that behavior. If it's disruptive, if it's distracting to the person, and if it's dangerous. If it's any of those three, you need to put some parameters around that behavior. In general, when you see more of those behaviors, it's very often an indicator of that your child is under stress. And that's good information to use to start to help him or her. All right, so how do we teach children on the spectrum? How can we teach them to learn these skills? And here's some principles. You want to be clear. Children on the spectrum tend to like concrete information. They like things to be clear. They don't like abstract language, things like metaphors. So if you say things like, just be as cool as beans, they're not going to relate to that. They may not even understand what it means unless you explain it explicitly. So be very clear, use very clear examples. You want to use visual supports. I'm a big believer in visual supports. And even if your child can read, they benefit from being able to also see something to help them to understand it. I picked up my son from the airport the other day, and again, the signs have all of the airlines listed on it. And even though I can read, I don't want to have to read all of those there as I'm driving by and looking for a parking space. But I know that it's color coded, and I know what color I need to go to in order to find the parking lot that I need to be at. And it's the same thing with autistic children. Those visual supports can help an awful lot. So you want to draw, you want to color, you want to label. I download a lot of images and I print them up. And these are ways that we can help our children to understand what a deep breath looks like, ways that they can tell us when they're anxious. The more visual support you can get in there, the better. Okay, another really important concept when it comes to teaching autistic children is the concept of generalization. That means understanding that when you teach something, it doesn't just apply to one situation, but it applies to similar situations. There have been plenty of times when I've worked with a child and I've said, maybe they'll say, we practice deep breathing. And I said, go ahead and practice this deep breathing when you get upset, when you go home. And they'll come back and they say, Dr. Lynch, I got really upset at school. And I say, well, why didn't you use your deep breathing? Well, because you told me to do that at home. So generalizing means knowing that if I'm teaching you a skill, I want you to use this in any situation that makes you anxious. It can be used in all of these different situations. So when you're teaching your children, you want to make sure you use different kinds of examples and make sure they understand all the different ways that they could apply a skill. All right, providing a rationale. Our kids are smart, right? Your kids are very smart, and they're nobody's fool. They're not going to practice something unless there's a good reason for it. Okay, and so you need to help your children understand how anxiety works and how these chill skills can help them to counteract anxiety. One thing that I like to say to my kids, because they pride themselves on their intelligence, is, hey, when you get anxious, you're not thinking very straight. You're very smart when you're anxious. When you're anxious, you're not smart. And you're a smart kid. So the calmer you are, the smarter you are. And when they understand that, it's real motivation for them to start to work to learn these skills. All right, explaining anxiety to autistic children. So I get scientific with my kids. I will talk to them about the nervous system and how we have an autonomic nervous system that has two switches. Sympathetic revs us up for action or to fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system calms us back down. Now, maybe for a younger child, I might use different terms. I might talk about a hot mode and a cool mode. And for small children, I might say things like stressful Sam and peaceful Pat. That when stressful Sam's around, you're very anxious. Peaceful Pat comes in, stressful Sam leaves the room, and now peaceful Pat's around, and you can relax with peaceful Pat. Okay. So obviously you want to tailor your language and your explanations to the developmental level of the child that you're supporting. Okay. Relaxation skills. All right, so I break this down generally into three areas. There are skills for the body, there are skills for the mind, and there are activities or practices that combine both the mind and the body, okay? I almost always start with deep breathing. And I explain to kids, deep breathing is the best skill you're going to learn because it's easy to do. You can do it anywhere. You can do it anytime. You can even do it in a way that other people don't know you're doing it. And you don't need a Wi-Fi connection to do it. And they usually get a kick out of that. So there are many ways to breathe, but one of the ways that I teach, it's called diaphragmatic breathing. And what that means is that when we get anxious, very often we breathe in a very shallow way up from our shoulders like this. When you learn to breathe diaphragmatically, what you're learning to do is you're dropping your diaphragm muscle. And so then your stomach expands. It's not that you're pushing your stomach out, but you're dropping your diaphragm so it expands. And that allows your lungs to expand. And that way you get in a greater amount of oxygen. And when you breathe slowly with a long exhale, it makes physiological changes happen that induce a state of relaxation. So I don't know, I'll back up a little bit here. So breathing anxiously up from up here. When you breathe diaphragmatically, it's like this. Okay. I swear that's all air. That's not my stomach. And there are many videos on this. There's a lot of instructional stuff on diaphragmatic breathing. You may have done it yourself. If you're a singer, very often you learn to breathe this way. They often teach this in practices like martial arts. And it's a great skill to teach kids. Not all kids can pull off that specific skill. It doesn't matter. As long as I get them to stop and breathe slowly and deeply, it's going to make a difference. And kids will sometimes say to me, "Well, Dr. Lynch, I tried breathing. That didn't make anything. That doesn't make any difference. I've been taught this before." I say, well, wait a minute. If you rate your anxiety 0 to 10, if you can bring it down from an 8 to even a 6, it's going to make a difference. So please try it. It's going to make a difference. So again, really helping them to understand why I'm teaching these skills. Okay, progressive muscle relaxation. So when our nervous system kicks off, a couple of things happen. Again, we breathe shallow in a shallow way, and our muscles tense up. So what I'm teaching them how to hack their own nervous system. Breathing is a great way to hack it, but we can also relax our muscles. That also hacks our nervous system, and it helps to kind of wind down and get back to a state of calm and rest. Many different ways of teaching this. I do have a script in my book, Totally Chill. One common way is to teach. You hold your fist out like this, make them tense, hold it, and drop it and relax. And try to notice the difference between the tension and the relaxation. Try it again if you want. So hold the fist out. Really think about the tension. And I'll say to kids, feel it tense. It's like a rubber band about to snap. Now let it go. Let it drop. Let it feel loose, calm, relax. Your arms are like 2 wet noodles, however they want to visualize it. You teach kids how to do this, and over time, they get really good at, as soon as they tense up, they know it, and they can automatically relax. So it's a great skill, but you got to really practice this one, okay? Okay. So those are my 2 favorite body techniques, because if we can control our breathing, if we can control our muscle tension, it's going to really help us to hack our nervous system and turn it around. Now, moving up to the mind. Imagery is great. So when we're anxious, we have these images in our mind, like it's almost like a horror movie, right? It's like we're picturing like the worst thing possible. If we could replace that with something calming, again, we're hacking our system. The brain's saying, okay, I was nervous, but now I'm picturing myself at the beach. I'm going to relax now because I'm at the beach now. So it's amazing what we can do with the power of the mind. And using our imagination is a great way. Now, sometimes you may have heard people say, well, autistic kids don't have imagination. I don't believe it. The kids I've worked with can imagine just as well as any other kid. They may have difficulty conveying that, but with some practice, they're well able to do this. I may start with a simple imagery, like picture a tomato. Now picture the wind on your face. Now picture yourself walking through a field of tall grass. And I'll try to incorporate as many senses as I can. And then I do a fun thing. I do microwave popcorn. And I have them imagine that they are microwaving popcorn. And we'll go through the whole scenario, put it in the microwave. Then I asked them to close their eyes. They put it in the microwave. They turn it on. They see it starting to spin. They start to smell it. The alarm goes off. They wait a few minutes because they don't want to burn themselves. And they open the bag. And they can feel the heat. And they take the popcorn and they put it in their mouth and they taste it. And that's just a really great way to teach your kids how to use their imagination. And then from there, I'll go into a relaxing scene. In my book, I have a mountain scene and we have a beach scene that they can use. And then after that, they can use whatever scene that they want. They can imagine themselves anywhere that's going to make them feel calm. This is great if they're on a bus ride and they're getting anxious about something, or if they want a quick and easy imagery before a test. They can imagine something calming. It can really make a difference. All right, so meditation, there's many different forms of meditation. It could be concentration on a word, a phrase. Sometimes it could be a prayer. And they also have mindfulness meditation that's very popular. And with mindfulness meditation, you don't concentrate on anything in particular, but you try to be aware of your surroundings and you just let information come and go in your brain. You don't act on it. One of the exercises that they often do is with a raisin, when you pick up a raisin and you imagine it, you look at it, and you pop it in your mouth. Although with taste sensitivities, I'm not sure how well that would work with some of our kids. There's also a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise where you picture 5 things that you see, 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you feel, 2 that you taste, 2 that you taste, and 2 that you smell, 1 that you taste, something like that. There's books for it. And again, this is mindfulness meditation. So those are some of the chill skills. Now, there are activities that combine all those elements. Yoga and Tai Chi are 2 excellent ones, okay? So with both of those practices, you're combining breathing, you're using some muscle relaxation. Very often there's some imagery involved with that, okay? And there's also a spiritual component that we can't discount as helping people with relaxation. Okay, and yeah, just please mute. Yeah, thank you. So, and there are some classes that are specific for children. I don't know about Tai Chi around here, but I know around here with yoga, there's classes for children, and there's even some specific autism ones. You just got to search around a little bit. All right, so thoughts are also important to address too, because when our kids get anxious, our autistic children get anxious, they get very rigid and they have very rigid thoughts about what's going on, okay? And like, this is horrible. This is the worst day of my life. This always happens to me. And so what I try to do is I try to help them counteract those thoughts. And a really easy way of doing that is with cartoon bubbles, with thought bubbles, with cartoon faces. And what I do here is I'll show them a situation, and I'll put in a thought bubble something that the kid is thinking. Video game broke. I can't stand it. And then what I'll do is I'll ask the child to draw in that circle. How do they think that person feels? Then I'll show them this one. Oh boy, my video game broke. I'll have to get it fixed. And I'll have them draw in that circle how that child feels. And we'll talk about the difference between the two. Same situation, but they had 2 very different perspectives. And because of that, they had 2 different emotional responses. One guy had a meltdown. The other guy wasn't happy about it, but he was calm about it and he was able to solve the problem. Okay. And then sometimes I'll flip-flop this. I'll draw on the face. I'll tell them what the situation is, and I'll have them put in what the thoughts are. Just a real simple tool to help your children to start to think differently when they get anxious. Okay, also important, there's a very close relationship between our physical health and our mental health, and they very often overlap and interact with each other. So it is important to encourage our children to to be healthy in general, okay? Eating healthy is obviously important. I never use the word diet, but I often use the word nutrition and health. Certain things you want to watch out for. You want to watch out for caffeine. Caffeine can increase anxiety. And a lot of these energy drinks that the kids are drinking have very high, even alarming amounts of caffeine in them. So you really want to watch that. Physical activity. There's all kinds of research showing that all kinds of exercise can have positive impacts on our mental health, whether it's stress, anxiety, or depression. Many, many studies have shown a clear benefit with physical activity. Of course, ideally, you want the child to do an activity that they like to do. It could be very natural, whether it's riding a bike or going for a walk as a family. Whatever it is, if you can get them to do it, it's a good thing. Sleep. I'm sure many of you have had issues with sleep with your children, right? Sleep problems are very common in autism for a variety of different reasons. I have a patient right now who he likes YouTube, right? And so he follows a YouTuber who lives in Malaysia. Malaysia is 12 hours away from where we are. And so this YouTuber will post live videos at 3 p.m. Malaysia time. And guess what it is here? It's 3 a.m. And so he's up at night watching these videos, and it's interfering with his sleep. And so I will encourage him to stick to a rule that between 10 p.m. and 10 a.m., no electronics, and to watch the video the following day when he's in a better state of mind. Okay, so good sleep hygiene, go to bed about the same time every night, wake up about the same time every day, cut yourself a little bit of a break on the weekends, but not too much. Watch out for long naps. Short naps can be good. Long naps can interfere with your sleep-wake cycle. And as I mentioned earlier, watch out for that caffeine, okay? I was tempted tonight to drink a cup of coffee because this is a bit late for me. I said, no, I want to sleep tonight. All right, and we want to not just focus on building up the skills, but we want to focus on our children's strengths, okay? We want to build up our strengths. Your children are wonderful. They have wonderful talents, okay? And so we want to give them an opportunity to share their talents, find out what they're good at, and find a way to showcase that, whether it's playing chess, robotics, whatever it is that they do, drawing. Find a way to bring that out and support that. We also have strength in the people around us. You want to help your children to know who supports them, who will support them if they're upset at school, who supports them if they're upset at home, who's around in their community that they can trust. And of course, our belief system. We can't underestimate this. Our religious beliefs, our cultural beliefs, our family beliefs, our inspirational quotes. I have one autistic girl. She really likes affirmations, and she actually has an app that uses affirmations when you say things to yourself that are meant to motivate. So all of these things can be really important in helping our children to withstand anxiety. I'm just going to take a look at the time here. Okay, I'm doing good. All right. I understand that some of you may have children with higher support needs. Some of your children may not be verbal or be minimally verbal, or they might have intellectual needs. And I understand that a lot of what I just said seems to apply to higher functioning kids or kids with less intense needs. So I don't want to leave you out. So here are some things you can do if your child has higher support needs. First of all, it's crucial that anybody, no matter what level of need you have, that you have a way of telling us when you're upset. If you can't use language, it could be something as simple as a hand signal, pointing to a picture. If your child uses an electronic communication device like a touch talker, make sure that you program in emotional words too. Not just, I need food, I have to go to the bathroom, but I'm upset, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. Make sure that your children have ways to communicate that to us. And then find what's comforting to your child. some kids, it's music, right? Music could be comforting to all of us. And it might be a peaceful place. So if they're very upset, maybe you can go to a place, whether it's a garden or a sensory tent or something like some place like that, that the child finds to be peaceful. For particular stressful situations, you might want to use a comfort object, something that the person can use when they're in a stressful situation. This works great at doctor's appointments. So if they're going to the doctor or dentist, that they have maybe a toy with them, something that makes them feel better. I have something here. I have a snake that I use here to demonstrate what anxiety looks like. And his name is Oscar. Here's Oscar right here. And so I have one kid that sometimes he has language needs. So when he gets upset, he'll bang his head like this. And so I know that he likes to play with this rubber snake. And so when he does that, I just hold up the snake and say, Oscar, and he goes, yes. And I hand it to him and he plays with it and that calms him down. So find out what's comforting to your children. Have it available, especially when you know when they may be upset. I always try to emphasize active strategy, no matter what level the child is at or the person is at. So things like a stress ball, things that the person can act upon so that they feel like they have a sense of control over their anxiety. And then finally, we all need rest ourselves, right? You know the old saying that on an airplane, they say when the oxygen mask drop, the parent takes it themselves before giving it to the child. It's the same thing with us in dealing with our children. We can't provide for our children if we are flat out stressed out from all the caretaking needs. So I'm a big advocate of giving parents respite and support and trying our best to give parents breaks so that they then have the energy to then support their children. Okay. All right. Hopefully the pace is okay here for you.
No, we're good. We're good.
Good?
Yeah,
Okay.
very good.
I'm not going too fast. Okay.
No, it's good. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So up until this point, I've been talking about chill skills, things that we can teach children to do. But there are also ways that there are things that we can do, to the environment when we see that our children are getting upset. And there are 5 areas that I find tend to be problematic, especially for kids with autism, but also for kids with ADHD and other learning neurodevelopmental challenges. So I call them my 5 prime suspects. Bear in mind that like any other, your child, first and foremost, is a child. Not an autistic child, they're a child. So they can be upset about anything that any child can be upset about. But these are areas that I look at in particular when I see that behavioral component coming out. First one is rigidity, okay? I'm not talking about your child being like a rigid person, like a domineering kind of person, but it's a function of the way that information is processed. In autism, very often the world is processing very minute details, which can be great. So your children may have fantastic memory for things. They might spot things that you can never spot yourselves. But the problem is when things change. So when things change, it's not like you're just changing one thing. It's as if their entire world has been turned upside down. So in my office, if something changes, like if move that picture back there, a kid not on the autism spectrum, they might notice it. Hey, Dr. Lynch, what happened to that picture you had back there? A kid on the spectrum, they're not only going to notice it, they're going to be a little bit anxious about it. Like, Dr. Lynch, what happened? Where'd the picture go? Because when they come to visit me, they're not thinking this place is Dr. Lynch's office. They're thinking of that place where I see Dr. Lynch, where he has the chair set up there, he has his desk situated this way, the door's over there, and that picture's up there. All those details go together for the autistic child. So that if you change a detail, it's as if you snapped your fingers and all of a sudden they're somewhere completely different. Very jarring, very upsetting for someone with autism. It takes them a while to get used to. Another thing related to change is transitions. So a lot of our kids get anxious when they're asked to move from one situation or task to another. Okay. I know what you're all thinking. Yeah, especially video games. They're trying to get them off video games. But it could be anything, right? So even here in my office, when kids come into my office, they're kind of upset. And then when they leave the office, you can see their anxiety ramp up a little bit. Again, all the details are changing. And so that's what gets them upset about. Okay, so what can we do about rigidity? Well, first of all, you want to minimize very abrupt or multiple changes. You don't want to run your school or your classroom or your home like a boot camp, but you want to make sure to avoid too many changes around the same time. Make sure that there's some structure to the day. When it comes to transitions, you want to ease your child into transitions whenever possible. Give them advance notice, warnings, if you will, okay? So that before the video game ends, you don't want to just, when your child's playing the video game, you don't want to just grab it. Okay, time's up. You want to tell them 10 minutes ahead of time, 3 minutes ahead of time, 1 minute ahead of time, then it's time to take the video game away. They may still get upset. Don't get me wrong. I know they will get upset, but it would be a lot easier if you gave them those advance notices. The other thing I can say about video games, it's also more natural. Rather than giving them time to stop, if you tell them when to stop, like after this game, when they reach the next level, when they get to the next save point, because that's going to give them some natural structure. Okay. I know it's not always easy, but whenever you can, do that. You want to prevent routines from forming in the first place. Okay. When I was in Ireland, I consulted with this preschool, and they did something I thought was really, really brilliant. They had different colored tricycles out in the schoolyard where the kids go for their recess. And if a kid came out and they picked, let's say, the red tricycle, they would make sure that the next day that they would pick the yellow tricycle or the green tricycle or the blue tricycle, because they knew the child chose the red tricycle on day 1, then day 2, then day 3. That's all it takes. Now they have to have the red tricycle, right? Because that's how routines form in the autistic mind. They can form very, very quickly. So you want to make sure that you have structure, but within that structure, you're mixing it up a little bit so that they don't develop these routines. You want to encourage them to broaden their interests. I'm sure many of your children have fantastic knowledge in a couple of areas, and you hear about it a lot, which is great. It's a great way for them to develop knowledge. It's a great way for them to feel confidence. But we want them to also be able to talk about different things. So if you do start to talk about something, you want to use it as a springboard to broader conversation. So if a child's obsession, for example, is train, talk to them about, well, have you been on a train? And where did you go? And what did you do when you got there? So that you're not just talking about trains, you're talking about the wider world. And when your children do handle change and transition well, make sure you point it out to them. Hey, that was great. I saw you were very flexible. We want to encourage positive behaviors and a positive mindset whenever possible. All right, this is a big one, sensory sensitivities. Many children on the spectrum have sensory sensitivities. It's very common in autism. The brain doesn't effectively filter out or organize sensations so that when they experience sensation, it can come through very, very harshly, okay? It could be any of the senses, so certainly sound is a big one, but also taste, also tactile stuff. A lot of kids don't like tags on their shirts or seams in their socks or being rubbed up against or touched. And it can even be things like harsh fluorescent lighting can be a challenge. And this causes our kids a lot of anxiety. So for example, I had a teen who was invited to a party and he really wanted to go. And I was like, yeah, this is great because this is social and he's going to go to a party and he's going to meet other kids. He said, I can't go there. I said, why not? Well, because there's going to be flashing lights. There's going to be music there. It's going to be too much for me. So the sensory sensitivities were really interfering with his ability to socialize. All right, what do we do about this? Whenever possible, minimize unpleasant stimulation. So for example, if you have a kid at school, he sits near the hallway, he's distracted by the noise, try to move him or her. Using things like headphones may also help. Environmental strategies, things like sound absorbing tiles. In Ireland, there was a school that had that, which was great because in a big room like a gym or a cafeteria, for the autistic person, the sound seems to bounce around and it's hard for them to concentrate. Natural lighting wherever possible is a good idea. And you want to come up with a coping plan. So you want to make sure that if you are going to some place where they may encounter stimulation, that they know what they can do. For example, if I have a child who's going to a wedding, what we'll do is many venues have their floor plans online, and we'll look it up and we'll say, oh, look at this. So you're going to a wedding here, and outside the hall, there's a little nook where you can sit. There's a balcony there where you can go. The bathrooms are over here. So these are the places you can go to if you get distressed. Obviously, I'll make sure that the parents are in on the plan so they know where the child is or where they may be requesting to go. But this is the kind of thinking that we have to do. We have to think ahead about what might be a challenge and try to anticipate it so that we can help our children to plan. And in general, you want to keep your kids in a good sensory comfort zone. Autistic kids get very easily understimulated and very easily overstimulated. It's a very fine line between the two. If they're understimulated, they're going to start to try to make their own stimulation. That might be hitting or rocking and stuff like that. If they're overstimulated, they're going to be overwhelmed, and that's going to cause challenges for them too. All right, another prime suspect is social anxiety. Autistic people struggle in social situations. They have difficulty understanding social rules and nuances. And it's difficult, whenever you're in a situation where you're not quite understanding what's going on socially, but you're not quite sure what it is, that's going to make you anxious. And so a lot of our kids get anxious for those reasons. And so social skills can be a challenge. So what do we do here? You want to set up social situations that are likely to be successful for you. And I know many parents mean well when they put their kids in activities because they want them to do something social. But if you can, please try to make sure it's the right social situation for them. Because if you put them in a situation and they fail at it, their social anxiety is only going to get worse, okay? In general, the kids that I work with tend to do well in smaller situations that are structured and that's based around their strengths, okay? So group 2 to 5 kids, maybe max. It's a structure activity, so they know what they're going to be doing. And it's around something that they're good at, whether that's robotics or chess or something like that. I don't want to overgeneralize here myself. So some kids on the spectrum can and do like group sports, but that tends to be one area that tends to be challenging for my kids. I find that they do well in group sports, and if they could be in a position that only requires one thing. So a lot of my kids in soccer, they do really well if they're the goalie, because that's their goal. That's their only job, is to watch for that. Or if they're playing baseball, if they're the catcher, because they have a very specific role to do, okay? But of course, these are generalizations. Your kid, if they like sports, put them in it, definitely. If they like it and they thrive at it, put them in it. But if not, think about point number 1 here. We do want to work up on social skills to build up confidence. Remember what I said earlier about generalization. So make sure that everybody in their environment is prompting them, cueing them, and reminding them about what to do. And you want to foster a tolerant atmosphere so they feel comfortable. Okay. So I'll quickly go over these next ones here. So language challenges are common also in autism. Some kids struggle with expressive language, saying things, conveying information. Some have challenges with understanding things. Some have both. And some children, they might have basic communication, but they have difficulty with the more social aspects of language. the pragmatic aspects, again, metaphors, similes, things like that. As I mentioned earlier, visual supports can help an awful lot. Visually based schedules can really help them. If your child's going to a new school, showing pictures or video of the new school before they go to it to help their brain to kind of get used to what's going to happen. All of these things can really help. Clear communication helps. You want to use what's called reduced language when you need to get a point across. That means focusing on a few key words or phrases. So for example, what you don't want to do, let's say you're running late for a party. What you don't want to do is this. Come on now, we got to get ready for Auntie Mary's party. Don't forget what happened last time. Last time we were late. Everybody got really, really upset about this. Come on now, we need to get your socks and shoes on. We need to get ready now. We need to get in the car right now. I'm a parent myself. Trust me, I understand that. I feel that way too often when we're running late. But that kind of language is only going to confuse your child and make it even more difficult for them to follow what you're trying to say. So break it down. Okay, now we're going to the party. Just wait. Keep socks and shoes on. Wait. Next step. Don't get me wrong. I don't want you talking to your children like this all the time. We don't want to talk to them like they're robots. But when you really need to get a point across, especially when they're anxious, you really want to think about this. And of course, I've mentioned this before, giving them a way to express when they're frustrated or anxious. And then my last suspect here is task frustration. What can they do when they get anxious, when they get frustrated? When you have great talent, but you can't express that talent, that is incredibly frustrating. And a lot of your kids, very bright, have great talents, but it's hard for them to put that into a product. It's hard for them, for example, to write out what their thoughts are. And so that creates a lot of frustration for our kids, and we need to help them with that. So you want to make sure, again, that they can tell us when they're frustrated. And how do we deal with skills? This addresses one of the questions that somebody wrote in ahead of time. We want to remediate, accommodate, or celebrate. Sometimes we need to build up a weakness. That's remediation. Sometimes we need to work around a weakness. That's accommodation. And sometimes we need to not just think about the weakness, but think about the strengths and build that out. That's celebration. So for example, let's take the example of writing. So a lot of kids on the spectrum struggle with writing. An example of remediation would be giving them occupational therapy on how to hold the pencil and how to form the letters. An example of accommodation would be giving them a laptop so that they can use that and type it in or speak it in rather than writing. And an example of celebration would be giving them a topic to write about that's going to really be exciting for them, like, whether they're writing about a Minecraft or Lego or something like that. Okay. Consider the timing of tasks. Most kids tend to do better give the challenging task near the beginning of the day, and be careful when they get tired not to give them things that are too challenging, and then do challenging tasks on a graduated basis. We all do best. We all learn best when we're challenged, but not overwhelmed. And it's finding that sweet spot for kids that's really important. And autistic kids are no different. And we need to find that sweet spot for them in order for them to thrive. Okay, getting professional help. So all those things are going to help. But when your child's anxiety is severe, when it's persistent, if they're so anxious that all these chill skills don't seem to be making a difference, then it's time to get some professional help. That could be therapy, it could be medication. Sometimes it's a combination of the two. Cognitive behavior therapy, what I do, a lot of that's teaching those chill skills I talked about earlier. It has a good track record in terms of the literature support. There are parent resources, including the resources the sponsors here, the Chinese American Association for Autistic Community and the Alliance for Impact. In New Jersey, there's an organization called the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and they have a chapter that's specifically for Chinese American parents, so I recommend looking into that. I don't know this California organization. I did some research just beforehand. So if you know anything about this organization, you can put it in the chat. But I know some of you out in California, so I wanted to do a little bit of research. You can always check with your child's school. You can check with your child's pediatrician as well. Okay, my resources. See, my commercial doesn't happen to the end. So I've got a couple of books. Totally Chill, My Complete Guide to Staying Cool is all those chill skills. It's written for the child. So they go through the workbook and they complete it. And you can go along with the child. That's for the child. And then anxiety management for kids on the autism spectrum. Those 5 suspects I talked about, I do it in depth and I give examples and different ways of addressing those anxiety producing factors. Okay. You can get them on Amazon. There's also a Chinese version as well. They will work with my publisher on that Chinese version. And the publisher directly is Future Horizons. I often get asked about other books for autism. There are so many out there. I don't even want to recommend them. Future Horizons is an excellent resource. I recommend going on that website and seeing what looks good. Look at the reviews, see what looks good. There's a ton of information out there, almost too much information, but over time, you'll start to sort through what's most important to you. You know, I do have to emphasize the importance of organizations like the one sponsoring me today. I know that many of you are coming from a different culture. I can appreciate that. My son doesn't have autism, but he had some challenges with the ADHD. And I'm American, as you can hear. And we came back from Ireland and I was lost. And so my wife joined some organizations where she really got with other parents, and she really got the scoop on what to do and how to advocate for resources. So I can't overemphasize the importance of connecting with other parents. All right, so key takeaways: anxiety is common in autism. It impacts on functioning. There are things that we can do, but there's the kids on the spectrum can also learn their own techniques. All right, so Ben did send me some questions ahead of time. I'm going to go through those now, and then I'm going to check out the chat and I'll see if there's anything there for me. Is that okay, Ben? Okay, good. All right, so there are a number of questions were about what to do when your child's upset and it takes a long time for them to calm down. And one of the questions, the situation that the kid would become very argumentative. In other situations, the child is upset and they won't accept help, and it can last for hours. Okay, and this is a common situation that I often hear about from parents. And what I have to say is that in this situation, very often less is more. When I talk to kids on the spectrum, teenagers who can tell me, they say sometimes the worst thing you can do is try too much to calm them down when they're upset. Now, don't get me wrong. We need to make sure our children are safe, and we need to let them know that we're there for them to help them. But sometimes the best thing to do is to give them that little bit of time, that little bit of space. Say, listen, when you're ready, I'm here to talk. I'm here to help you. And that often gets their mind in the right place when they're then able to calm down and talk it through with you, okay? Don't get me wrong, we have to have consequences for behavior, and if your child's talking disrespectfully, etc. But if they're having a meltdown, that's not the time to talk about consequences, because that's only going to ramp up the situation. And I can guarantee you that most of your children, in fact, I'm going to say all of your children, feel badly after they have a meltdown. And I know many of my kids will then later on go to their parent and they will express remorse, either directly or indirectly. So there's plenty of time for consequences down the road, and your children will be ready to accept those consequences once they're calm. But if they're really distressed, it's just your only goal is to get them back into a calm state of mind, okay? All right, another question I had was, this also unfortunately is a common situation. A child makes a suicidal statement when they're upset. I hear this all the time. I experience this all the time with my own patients, okay? Something goes wrong, I want to kill myself, okay? They don't really want to kill themselves, okay? But they have no way, the anxiety comes so quickly, they don't have the words to express what's really upsetting them. And that it's an easy way for them to express their frustration to an extreme sense. Problem is that schools in particular, not just schools, but especially schools, they're very risk averse. And they, to a fault sometimes when it comes to this issue. And so if a kid makes that kind of statement, very often they're going to send them home and they're going to require them to get an evaluation. Very often for an evaluation, you need to go through an emergency department, not always, but very often. It's a stressful situation for everybody. Sometimes I've had kids sent home in ambulances. So it's a problem. So you want to do two things. Number one, you want to give your children the skills and the words to express when they're frustrated, to do it accurately. Don't say, I want to kill myself, if what you really want to say is, I need help, okay? Or I'm frustrated. So that's number one. And then number two, really highlight for them why it's a problem to say they want to hurt themselves when they really don't. Of course, I have to emphasize that if your child really is expressing suicidal ideation and it's accompanied by self-deprecation, I'm no good, I'm useless. If it's accompanied by feelings of depression, if it's accompanied by real plans, I want to hurt myself and here's how I'm going to do it, I'm going to run out into traffic later on today, then you really do need to take action, okay? But very often with kids on the spectrum, they say this and they don't really mean it. I really appreciate that. Was an excellent question because it happens to me all the time. Okay, I did have a question regarding psychiatric medication. This is the part where I say, I'm not a physician. But that being said, I can certainly talk about medication. Medication doesn't cure autism, okay? But it can help with the comorbidities. So the medicine doesn't treat autism, but it might treat the ADHD that goes along with autism. It might treat the anxiety that goes along with autism. It might treat the aggressiveness that goes along with autism. So there are classes of drugs that I've seen used with positive effects for ADHD. For the one thing that tends to freak parents out a little bit is for the aggressive part of autism. Very often they prescribe antipsychotic medication, Abilify and risperidone in particular. And what I'm going to say is that medication is never the complete answer, but sometimes it can really make a difference. And there is research that shows that there can be benefits, but it's highly variable. The response is highly, highly variable. That means I can have a kid on the spectrum, you give them an SSRI, which is used to treat anxiety, and they do wonderfully on it. And it makes a big difference. I can have another kid, autism, give them an SSRI, horrible. Side effects, makes the anxiety worse. So the best advice I can give you is have a conversation with your healthcare provider. Find somebody you can trust. Nobody's going to force your kid to take medicine. It doesn't hurt to at least get a consultation, do the research, talk it over, and then think about it, okay? All right. Another question I had was about, there's a lot of questions around flexibility. I hope that during my talk, I answered a lot of those questions. Again, you want to encourage and reinforce flexibility whenever possible. We need to teach flexibility as a skill. There was another one where they talked about a routine, and it really seemed like it was compulsion, where the child had to take pictures about things constantly. And I have to emphasize that there are autistic routines where kids like to do things a certain way, and then there's compulsions. So when it becomes a compulsion, it's a problem because, again, it meets one of those 3 Ds. It's disruptive, it's distracting, it might be dangerous, it's interfering with their functioning. When that happens, you really need to see a professional for that, Okay, an obsessive compulsive disorder, often a combination of medicine and cognitive behavior therapy can help. That was, again, an excellent question. All the questions were very good. And then there was one about language delay and the child does somersaults when they get frustrated. Again, I hope I may have answered that a little bit through my talk. It's really important to give our kids a way of expressing frustration. So before you see them do the somersault, role model for them how they can tell you when they're upset beforehand, whenever possible. And again, your children are growing, their brains are growing. They are going to get better at speech and language or communication. They are going to get better at attention. All these things are going to improve, but we have to give them the input to keep that development going as much as possible. Okay. All right. I'm going to take a quick peek at the chat here.
Okay, so Dr. Lynch, if you have a few minutes, because we can asking the audience to raise some questions. But one thing I probably particularly want to ask you is that, I know that this topic is probably mostly focused on the autistic children. When we're talking about the adult, like a young teenager, young adult there, right? And do we have any other way to talking about the frustration? Especially we have a challenge, especially for some very smart kids, which is maybe when they are children, the autistic side is not obvious or maybe not even diagnosis. Then when they go on into the high school, especially in the college, lots of issues come out. Okay, so I think this is very difficult for the family right now because they did not have have a history working with as the child. They already have autistic or ADHD. Then because lots of symptoms they found later, they find out, okay, he probably is undiagnosed one.
Yeah.
And this is the most difficult one we can talk,
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a good point. So I see this happening a lot with smart kids in general. So whatever the diagnosis is, and here's the issue. It's a little bit of a problem. When kids are really, really smart, grammar school, elementary school can be very easy for them because they don't have to put in the effort to sustain their attention. A lot of kids on the spectrum, their memories are fantastic. So they pick up information. You just put them in a classroom and I mean, it's just amazing the amount of information that my patients have, and they pick it up like that. And once they learn it, it's in there forever. But everybody has a breaking point. So as you get some kids, it's middle school. So as you go through the grades, the assignments get longer, the requirements on attention get more intense. Sometimes that doesn't happen until college, where they have to juggle all of these different classes and due dates and priorities. So these are skills that you want to work on throughout the lifetime. You want to work on them proactively. And some of the skills that are really important for college are those executive function skills. The executive function is like the manager part of the brain. And the way I like to describe it is like as a restaurant. So like you can have a restaurant that has a great chef and be in a great location, have great wait staff. But if the manager is lousy, you're not going to pull it off. And same thing with our brains. We can have a great memory. We can have great ability with numbers. We can have great skills, but we need that part of our brain that's able to organize it and know, okay, I apply it this way. I apply it that way. Here's how I organize my schedule. Here's how I prioritize. I think a lot of the kids that you're talking about, they struggle in college or in the high school years because that executive function gets overwhelmed. And so that's really where they need a combination of things. So they need some support around that, but they also need themselves to build up those skills and to acknowledge that they need help in those areas.
Okay, so we have some question about panic attack.
Yeah. Okay. So panic attacks can happen in a couple of different ways. So one kind of panic attack is acute panic attack. That means that the child has a panic attack, but it's because they're in a specific situation. So there's thunder and lightning outside, so they have a panic attack for that reason. So that kind of a panic attack, you want to try to help the child to address whatever it is that's making them fearful, try to anticipate it before it happens, try to have a plan for how they're going to calm themselves when that situation happens. The other kind of a panic attack is an uncued panic attack. So sometimes in our brains, we experience a rush of anxiety for no particular reason. It's as if we're nervous, but there's no reason why. It could be a very distressing feeling because you're not sure why you're anxious, you know you are. And so then the brain is wondering, is trying to make up reasons. So sometimes the child might think that there's something going on, they're losing their mind, that sort of thing. For that kind of panic attack, you really want to use some grounding techniques. The long diaphragmatic breath helps a lot with that. And there's a lot of research that shows that long, slow, deep breathing can help stop a panic attack. But also just you want to get the child calm, help them realize where they are, do it calmly without using too many words. And you want to kind of get them back out of their heads and into the situation that they're in so that they're not being swept away with the panic attack. Some kids, if they respond to a hug, great. Some kids will not respond to a hug. But let them know you're there for them. Do whatever you can to kind of get them grounded. Okay.
Okay, so next one said, Dr. Lynch, my son has been very tired, probably due to anxiety. How to help him to get energy? Should we have some blood testing to identify the root cause?
Yeah, low energy, it's probably a good idea to talk to a physician because low energy can be due to a lot of different things. But with regard to the anxiety, first of all, you want to check on sleep. If he has anxiety, he may not be sleeping very well, and obviously sleep is going to affect our energy level. But anxiety is exhausting because you're constantly thinking, and that takes energy. So you want to make sure that you give the children breaks. Exercise is great for two reasons. Number one, it does build up our stamina, but also exercise is what I call a head relieving activity. When we're reading, when we're studying, when we're on video games, it fills our head. Things like listening to music, going for a walk, exercising, that clears our head. So more of those activities interspersed with the other ones, I think will help his energy level. Also look at the sleep and absolutely talk to your physician about it.
So next one is how to help autistic children realize they are in the anxious mode so they can practice those calming strategies without the prompting.
Excellent question. I kind of skimmed over it a little bit. I did show you Oscar earlier. One of the first things I do with kids, this is going to sound a little cruel, but everybody likes it. I throw this, I hide this, and I throw this by their feet. I go, look out, snake. And usually they'll do that. And then I talk about, okay, what happened? How did you feel? We talk about how their muscles tensed up. We talked about what happened with their breathing when they got anxious. I really want to teach kids what it feels like to be anxious so that they can use that as an internal cue. Okay, I'm starting to get upset now. The other thing that helps, especially with autistic kids, because autistic kids like numbers, is to use a number scale. And we'll talk about anxiety from 0 to 10. 10 is complete panic, 0 is complete calm. And get your child to start thinking about, okay, you're anxious. Where is it at? Is it a 4? Is it a 5? Is it a 6? That will help them get better able to kind of know when they're anxious and how severe it is.
Okay, so so this is the young man we have a young audience, 33 years old, high functional. It's very high functional, I believe. Failed some basic and important that many other people can do. Okay, so like I went to the wrong shop. I resent being blamed, be controlled, be suppressed, to take care of my demanding relative and friends. Okay, and hold on a second, there here. I'm gonna here. So okay, so So how should I get rid of the long-standing anger? I think he feel anger because he did something wrong. And, this is the lasting the feeling here.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, let me break this down a little bit. Let me unpack this.
Uh,
So with regard to the failing something basic, we all do that. So don't feel bad about that. And you want to focus on what you can do. I'm sure there are many things that this person can do that you're very good at, in fact, better than other people. So you want to look at life flexibly in terms of anybody. We have things that we're very good at, things that we're not so good at, many things that are mostly in between. And regarding the resentment part, I really, that's a tough one to answer in a direct question. I think that would be something that would be a really good idea to work out with a therapist, that you can really talk about how to kind of deal with those feelings. I do think sometimes people try to help, but sometimes they're not being helpful in a way that really works for us. So if you can find a delicate way of saying that to your family and friends, like, listen, I appreciate you're trying to help me. However, tell them what you do need. Like, what I do need right now is I need for you just to talk to me, just to listen to me. I need for you to give me advice. If you can, when people are trying to help you in a way that's not helpful, and they are friends and family, try to let them know what way that they can be helpful to you. But I do recommend really kind of work through that, because I do understand that frustration. I do see it in some of the kids that I work with, because as they get older, because they try something and they fail, they try something and they fail, and it can be easy to get into that pattern and feeling that you can't do anything, but it's just not true. There are many things you can do. You just got to find the right supports and persist at it.
Okay, so we will take 2 more questions. Okay, then we probably can finish it by 10:30. One quick question is, how do we redirect the children who repeats the same phrase over and over again every day? Mostly it's non-functional language and the scripting. I believe this is children on the autistic side.
Yeah. No, that's again, this is very common with autism. It can be a challenge to work with. You certainly want to make sure you're working with a speech and language therapist. They sometimes help with this too. But you want to broaden the things that they talk about. You want to broaden and reinforce them when they do talk about things that are non-scripting and that are functional language. So getting them to talk about something that they like, that's not part of their scripting. Like if they got a puppy, let's say that they saw a puppy. Let's talk about the puppy. What color is the puppy? And if the child can't talk, you still role modeling the use of words. Brown puppy, nice puppy, soft puppy, furry puppy, giving them different words to use to really expand on their language, so that it's not so scripted all the time. Again, scripting can sometimes be a sign of anxiety too. So if it's happening very quickly, very rapidly, and you see some tension behind it, you want to think about what's causing this. Is there anything that we can do to reduce the anxiety? Because very often when you reduce the anxiety, the scripting tends to go down. But reinforce that language, okay? Communication. And if they can't speak, any way that they can point to something, bring you something, you want to smile, you want to reinforce that as much as possible. This is not going to happen in a day or week or even in a month. This is something that's going to happen over time. As their language skills improve with speech and language therapy, that is going to become less and less. They may still script a little bit, but it's going to mostly happen during times when they're under high stress.
Okay, so we'll take the last question. It's high functional kids graduate from high school. No matter taking class in a college or doing a job, he always quits from 2 hours or 4 weeks due to different reasons, such as social anxiety, not sure the major class is right, or distress from professor. The job is too complex, the customer, the boss not satisfied, everything. So it looks like he always quit and give out the reason. How can we help him?
Okay. All right. Low frustration tolerance is very common, right? It's very common in autism. It's very common in ADHD. It's very common in learning disabilities. So a lot of people on the autism spectrum, when they get frustrated, they very quickly get overwhelmed. It's for a variety of reasons, and we need to address all those reasons with this young man. So it could be that they can't see a solution. It could be that they're a perfectionist and that they want things to be absolutely perfect. And when it's not, they just want to quit. So you want to make sure that whatever these factors are that's contributing to that frustration that you're addressing, while also teaching them that frustration is part of life, commitment is part of life, that when you do something, you commit to it, you need to follow through with it. And then, of course, whenever you do catch them persisting at something, reinforcing it. You highlight, hey, you got through that. Let's say they mowed the lawn, for example. It was a hot day today. You did it. Excellent. Good job. Here's a glass of lemonade or whatever, what have you. So reinforcing them when they do persist will hopefully help with this too. But it definitely sounds like frustration tolerance is the primary problem here. And you're going to have to address it from as many angles as possible. Have a conversation each time each of these things happen. What was it? Was it the class was hard? Was it that it was too noisy? Try to get them into a problem-solving mode so that they know that when they get frustrated, there are things they can do other than quit. There's always a solution to make things better.
So I have a very quick question follow up with this one, because this is probably one of the question everybody, lots of people asking. Now, take an example of the last one. If the guy, young man, quit a job like this one is very, very unusual, even normal. So on certain way is what is the defined line said, hey, I need to take him to a psychologist, or I need to take him as a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. And you just reminded me of one more thing I want to say. Sometimes they may not be psychologists, psychiatrists. Sometimes they might need support on the job. Mm-hmm. They might need like a job coach, for example. Mm-hmm. Or in colleges have autism specific programs that can help them when they get frustrated to get through it. So they might need some very practical help at that for that situation. So psychologists can help them with that task frustration, with building up those skills. If it's because they get depressed because they're persistently sad, they're saying things that are really getting down on themselves, sleeping all the time, there's low energy accompanied by that, then in that case, you could see both, but I would make sure to see a psychiatrist for that too. Or if the anxiety is so high that the heart is racing, that they seem like they're constantly anxious, they're constantly worried, they can't sleep because they're worried about things, then I would also see a psychiatrist too for that. And again, very often the kids that I see both a psychiatrist and a psychologist.
Okay, so it's almost done. But I'm just the one to tell you the number that we have probably a night on the Zoom. We have as high as 90 people attending, and on the China we know that we're broadcasting from Huaxia publishing company. They have totally 450.
Great!
In the view, yeah. So it's a big country anyway.
Yeah,
and I think it's very variable because this topic is really. We need learning, and I really hope that all the people here not just give applause. We need to do it. We need the learning. And very important is need applying to your own children, helping them to cope with their ones. So we will be based on the Total Chill book. There, we will organize some of the the reading, sharing session there, and we need to do this. We need to apply every knowledge to the children, help them. That's our goal, So again, Dr. Lynch, it's really appreciate. It's so late right now, and thank you for great work, and we just very grateful for all of the parents here, all the from China, from here, and really grateful for their great work and appreciate. Thank you very much.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, all your questions, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Good night. We can stay here a little bit to answer some question if you join the group anything. But Dr. Lynch will say good night to you and thank you very much. Okay.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Yeah. 所以如
Thank
果
you,
大
Dr.
家有
Lynch.
什么问题，大家需要那个的话，我们的那个黄老师也在，黄老师是南开的这个孤独症研究中心的主任也是我们华人自闭症协会的这个领导，所以他也是一个专家的这儿。所以呢，我们有这个时间，大家可以如果有什么想法。可以交流一下。最主要的是不要光听了，不要光听这个好那个好，你要做，你得花时间把这个学到的东西根据你孩子的需要送上去。所以呢，我们也是非常，因为这个 Dr. Lynch 就是我们的一个家长，他带着孩子跟他做这些治疗以后推荐给我们的，所以我们原来也知道他出了这个书，但是我们更希望有那种实战的，可以家庭可以用上去。所以那本书呢，就是相当于你帮孩子去做这些练习，对不对？希望某些东西可以让你孩子掌握。那么有一个大的问题就是说，你孩子大了怎么办？这个你不一定能够像小孩子一样可以自己做这个练习册了，对吧？这个也是个大难题，是我们一步步来嘛。是不是？大家有什么问题或者有什么看法，大家可以交流的，大家可以讲。
我想问一下，我们是参加这个 group 不久，怎么样加到那个，比如说specific ASD group
你加那个 Linda 的这个，
我已经甚至加了那个 request。
对。
另外就是说加完以后，这比较好，就是能够找到比较 local 的这个parents。就是说，是不是能够相互也走动，有时候可能说不定能够搞些活动，是吧？
对，这个我们非常提倡的。我们在纽约，我们有2-3个家长组织，然后 Linda 也在洛杉矶。
加州我有一个，加州
也有一个基点。我们其他地方有亚特兰大，我们有费城的、马里兰的、DC 的包括圣路易斯的那个雅雅坝。这个我们都有一些就是以大陆的国内的这个家长为主的这个家长群，我们非常希望我们原来在德州也看到几个家长，我们说你们组成了以后慢慢就会壮大，因为这些资源非常重要的，对吧？那么最好的你还可以去注册以后你就成为正式的组织，那么你讲的分量对家长唱权都可以，对吧？我们这里呢，就 ASD 包括这个华人自闭协会呢，我们主要现在还是讲座，一种是这样的讲座，我们有机会都会安排各方面的情况。另一方面，我们每个星期3晚上我们有一个读书会，我们都是针对特殊需要的，也就是自闭症跟多动症这2个领域的，对吧？那所以这也是大家可以来参加的。平时的话一些交流就是一些大家相互的交流。我们也想做一些更多的，比如昨天我们讨论会的时候就讲能不能做一些对于特殊孩子的这个就业跟择业方面的辅导。我们说我们有那么多家长从事各种的择业，我们可以介绍自己择业，然后从你的角度来看看这个择业如果是多动症如果自闭症的话，他们有什么好处有什么坏处，对吧？这个东西我们都可以，大家可以大家现知现测。对，录像呢它是在 AFI 呢它有一个频道它有一个YouTube 的频道上面它会每周都发。我们也会在就是美国华人自闭症协会，我们也有这个channel， 我们也会放上去，反正多一点资源都会比较好一点。来 有一个孩子语言方面的问题，你有什么问题你问，你开麦好了，没问题。加拿大也有啊，加拿大我们加拿大有这个吴英老师，刚才也在讲座当中，对吧？他是在阿尔伯特我们还有我知道我们还有这个在多伦多的家长群。哎，吴老师你好，你好，你好，你来说好了，你加拿大你来说好了啊。
你好，你哦，加拿
刚刚有
大我也不
人问说加
是
拿大有没有
其他
这方面的？
省，其他省我不太了解。有一个嘛，其他省我不太了解，因为我们这个我只是在我们这个阿尔伯塔的 Calgary 有我们一个自闭群。对，我是听了他这个整个讲了一片，我一个比较欣慰的地方就是我们家儿子基本上他讲所有方法我们都用上了，就是对于我来说他讲的是宽度足够了。但是呢，可能就像你说，就是深度还欠缺一点，因为它可能涉及面太多，就是这个 practical 就具体用到孩子身上那个，可能就说因为时间不够嘛，所以他讲的并不是太多。所以我问的那个问题，我认为我问的那个第二个问题嘛，我就说，其实在我们看来，我们更希望就是刚开始我们是 prompt 我们的孩子，对吧？注意到自己的这个情绪是什么状态，然后来同时告诉他该怎么调整，像这个深呼吸呀、腹式呼吸，我们都会告诉他要这么做。但最终我们是希望我们孩子自己能意识到自己的问题，对不对？
对。
然后他自己弄，这样的话他就是独立了嘛。其实那个是我们最终的目标，要做到这一步。
对，他有 self awareness，他就
对，
知道怎么去弄，所以他那个很多东西也是他的做法，说一下子让那孩子吓一跳，他就知道了。所以这种呢，就可以让孩子亲身感受到来做。那么如果是一个青少年是那个什么，那就不一样，因为你这个青少年如果焦虑的话，你这个老妈一说，他火气大了，他反而跟你弄了。所以这个又是不同年龄的，确实是这方面的一个关很大，对吧？
对。
所以
我觉得就是说，应该还是要从小就练起，从小就练起，让他就是要意识到自己的这种emotion 的这种状态，然后对这个就是从小练起，对他将来到青春期就会好很多。他会就像我们成人，就像我们自己啊，就是有时候会叫自己情绪不好的时候，有时候会意识到哦，我这个好像现在不好，我找点什么事儿让自己开心一下，对吧？就是把这个不好的东西给排遣掉，或者是给他对于我们孩子，可能他们其实更需要帮助。如果越小越早开始的话，可能对他到青春期他就有一定的基础了。
对，是这样的，就这真的是我们现在看到很多也是很可惜的是，因为小的时候功能很高，刚才医生讲了，他做什么都可以，都非常的刚才都非常的容易就过去了，掩盖掉了。然后一到大了，你到了高中、大学了，问题出来了，那时候你讲都没法跟他讲。所以呢，我是觉得，对我们来讲，这方面的家长是更困难的。对我们从小来这个弄起来就更困难，对不对？所以这个都是可以理解。有没有 group 在 San Francisco Bay Area 的？应该有很多华语家长。因为我知道应该有很多的Bay Area 的是那个叫做特殊孩子之友Friends of Special Needs Family， 这是一个很老的，就是老牌的华裔组织，他们有买地啊、建房子都有。可能现在他们主要的关注的是成年的孩子，我不大知道，你可以找一下，叫 FCS 好像叫，就是特殊孩子之友特殊孩子之友，这个都没问题。那么将来大家如果家里大家有各自有资源的，也可以推荐我们去这些很多消息都是各种家长推荐给我们的，对吧？那么我们也非常希望有这种能够跟实际情况相结合的这些讲座多一点。刚才吴老师讲了，我们说当然他只有他准备的是1个小时的演讲，他没有那么细节可能是在那本书里面。我们希望多一点的学习这方面的。
应该说那个 FCS 是什么？是有个网站吗？
不是，是它一个组织名称，网站我不知道，你可以
不知
查，
道
叫做特殊，
叫什么英文的这个
好叫 Friends of Special
needs？
needs 是吧？Friends of，我帮你，等一下，你或者你放在群里面，到时候我找到以后给你这个弄。他们是一个老牌的，就是老移民组成的一个
Friends of
华人。
Special needs。
这个到群里面，到时候我发给你好了，没问题，我能查出来。
好嘞，
他们也有网站，他们也有这个。
你对在群里那个 post 也行，我已经加了您的那个加了朋友了。
好的，可以，没问题，没问题，没问题，没问题，好不好？
好
如果大家没有什么问题的，我们
冯老师就是那个 San Francisco 那个自闭症之友，我把他们的网站前一阵发给过您，我回来等一下找到我发给您好了。
对，这个可以找到这个可以找到，没问题。我们也可能将来收集一个目录吧，各地的家长的各种自发的群，我们也可以做一个这样的工作，然后大家联系起来就方便，对不对？
那个，对不起，那个旧金山的那个能也发给我一下吗？
对，到时候我发给你，我发给你。旧金山那个，
好，
对，好不好？对 ，Friends of Children with Special Needs， 都是这个，好像是这个。
OK， 好
FCSN，
对 FCSN 好像他们简称叫 FCSN。
我找到这个Google 了一下，我发的那个群里看是不是这个？我发的，好，谢谢。
对，就是。
那我们交换资源，太好了。
对。
刚才想，咱们其实能不能把就是全美各地的，就是这些家长组织，咱们如果知道的放在咱们那个网站上，这样家长去搜索方便一点，比他们随便在网上这样搜可能方便点。
对，因为那个是这样，就是有些呢是非正式的，有些是正式的。正式的我们知道注册的就这么几个，然后亚特兰大、圣路易啊、纽约啊，我们知道费城也有这些注册的，包括那个 San Francisco。那有些没有注册的，就大家什么微信群啊什么，大家如果有那个的话，都告诉我们，然后我们也可以整理一个。因为我们原来跟那个 Autism Speak 自闭症讲过，说我们可以在他们的联系那个网站上，我们可以有一个中文连接，那么点一下各地中文的这些团体，对吧？所以呢，那时候也在想到底怎么形式，要正式注册的呢，还是就大家草根的呢？我觉得草根的可能更好一点，因为大家联系更方便，所以这个也是一个很好的一个，然后将来我们可以做的一个任务吧。
对，
也特别鼓动大家可以抱团，然后可以成立组织最好就是成立组织了，对吧？讲话都有人应了，对吧？这个最好的我很快的弄个说，有一个关于孩子语言的问题，孩子6岁那就能听懂英文，但还没有接触到学校，这种情况下，学校语言会有很大的什么有大的问题吗？这个好像 general speaking， 我们在这个都市，总是在纽约，这种情况很多的。一般来说，人家觉得没有关系的。你这个小孩子学语言，他很快的，他可以到了这个环境当中，他很快就可以上去。可能你有前面的半年或者时间，孩子会比较怕一点，或者是弄一点，但是他接触以后很快就上去。我女儿小的时候也是不会讲英文，然后在学校当中有1年时候她更不讲话，变成那个选择性缄默症，但是她知道，她脑子知道，所以她很快，等她自己觉得有信心了，马上就上去了，所以应该没问题。我们原来有很多的研究，就是这个这个自闭症孩子也是可以双语教学的，没有问题的。 但是如果是你觉得孩子这个的语言当中需要强化的话，只有一种语言的话，那也可以。反正总而言之没有问题的，我就觉得没有问题。还有什么吗？没有什么，我们就这个好不好？没。